The gunshot echoed through Whispering Creek like thunder on a clear day, silencing every conversation in Tully's saloon as Vivian Greeley burst through the swinging doors, her emerald dress stained with blood that wasn't hers. The year was 1875, and in a town where everyone minded their business until business was worth gossiping about, Vivian had just given them something to talk about for years to come. "I need a room," she said to the stunned barkeep, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "And I need it now." The barkeep, a portly man with a handlebar mustache yellowed from tobacco, hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Third door on the left upstairs. $2 a night." Vivian placed $5 on the counter. "I'll take it for the week. And I'd appreciate discretion." As she climbed the creaking stairs, whispers already began to ripple through the saloon. She'd come from nowhere, with nothing but a small leather satchel and secrets etched into the tight lines around her eyes. At 26, Vivian Greeley had the weariness of someone who'd lived a lifetime already. Outside, Gabriel Porter dismounted his dun stallion, dust from the trail still clinging to his denim pants and cotton shirt. At 32, he'd seen enough of the world to recognize trouble when it rode into town. As the newly appointed sheriff of Whispering Creek, it was his job to know everyone's business, whether they wanted him to or not. The horse's reins wrapped securely around the hitching post, Gabriel pushed through the saloon doors, his spurs announcing his arrival with metallic chimes against the wooden floor. "Sheriff Porter," the barkeep called. "You just missed quite the entrance." Gabriel removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached brown hair and eyes the color of whiskey. "Do tell, Frank." Woman came in, dress covered in blood. Didn't seem injured herself. Took a room upstairs. Frank leaned across the bar, lowering his voice. "Paid in advance. $5. Gabriel nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "Anyone know her?" "Never seen her before." This came from Elmer Willis, a cattle rancher who'd been drinking at the saloon since noon. "But she's running from something. Or someone. Mark my words." "Appreciate the insight, Elmer, but I'll form my own opinions." Gabriel placed his hat back atop his head. "Which room?" "Third on the left." Frank hesitated. "She asked for discretion, Sheriff. And she'll get it. Just need to make sure she's not in any danger." Gabriel climbed the stairs, the aged wood protesting beneath his weight. He knocked firmly on the third door. "Who is it?" The voice inside was guarded. "Sheriff Gabriel Porter, madam. Just checking that you're all right." Silence stretched for several seconds before the lock clicked, and the door opened just enough for him to see a sliver of her face. "I'm fine, Sheriff. Thank you for your concern." Gabriel took in what little he could see: bright green eyes framed by dark lashes, a patrician nose, and lips pressed into a firm line. "The blood on your dress suggests otherwise, madam." She glanced down, as if noticing the stains for the first time. "It's not mine. That's what concerns me." Gabriel kept his tone even. "Mind if I come in? This conversation might be better had in private." After a moment's hesitation, she opened the door wider, allowing him entry into the sparsely furnished room. A bed with a faded quilt, a washstand with a chipped basin, and a single chair were all the accommodations offered. Now that he could see her properly, Gabriel understood why she'd caused such a stir downstairs. She was beautiful, but not in the painted way of saloon girls. Her beauty was refined, cultivated, the kind found in the parlors of Boston or New York, not the dusty streets of Whispering Creek. "I'm Vivian Greeley," she said, extending her hand with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to formal introductions. Gabriel removed his hat and took her hand briefly. "Gabriel Porter. Care to explain the blood, Miss Greeley?" "Mrs." she corrected automatically, then winced. "Though I suppose that's no longer accurate." "Mrs. Greeley, then. The blood." Vivian sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly looking exhausted. "My husband, former husband, attempted to kill me this morning. He failed. His associate did not share his good fortune." Gabriel's eyebrows rose. "You're saying you killed someone?" "I'm saying I defended myself, Sheriff." Her chin lifted defiantly. "James would have shot me if his friend hadn't gotten in the way." In the struggle that followed, the gun discharged again. "And where is your husband now?" "I don't know." Vivian's hands twisted in her lap. "He fled after what happened. We were traveling by stagecoach. I took a horse from the station and rode here." Gabriel pulled the chair closer and sat, placing his hat on his knee. Start from the beginning, Mrs. Greeley. Why was your husband trying to kill you? Vivian laughed, a brittle sound devoid of humor. Because I discovered he wasn't actually my husband. His name isn't even James Greeley. He's Edward Blackstone, wanted in 3 states for swindling wealthy widows out of their fortunes. Her voice hardened. I'm just the latest fool who fell for his charms. Gabriel processed this information, his expression thoughtful. And you have proof of this. Reaching for her satchel, Vivian withdrew several folded newspaper clippings. I found these among his things. Different names, same man, same scheme. Gabriel examined the clippings, wanted posters and newspaper articles detailing the exploits of a confidence man who preyed on vulnerable women of means. When he realized I'd discovered his true identity, he decided I was a liability. Vivian's voice remained steady, though her hands trembled slightly. We were alone in the stagecoach with his partner, another confidence man named Thomas Ryan. They planned it carefully, but I overheard them talking while they thought I was asleep. That was careless of them, Gabriel remarked, still studying the clippings. They underestimated me. A ghost of a smile crossed Vivian's face. Most men do. Gabriel looked up, meeting her gaze. So what happened on that stagecoach? When James Edward pulled his gun, I lunged for it. Thomas got in the way, and the bullet struck him instead. In the struggle, the gun fired again. She closed her eyes briefly. Edward jumped from the coach and fled on foot. The driver stopped when he heard the shots. I told him there had been an accident, took one of the horses, and rode until I reached this town. You left a dead man in a stagecoach and fled the scene. Gabriel's tone wasn't accusatory, merely stating facts. I panicked. For the first time, her composure cracked slightly. I'm a woman alone in a strange territory with a murderous con man potentially pursuing me. What would you have done, Sheriff? The question hung in the air between them. I'd have done what was necessary to survive, he finally answered. But now we need to make this right. I'll need to send a telegram to verify your story. Of course. Vivian nodded. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you stay here. Don't leave town. Gabriel stood, placing his hat back on his head. I'll post a deputy outside the saloon, just in case your not-husband decides to finish what he started. Thank you. The words were simple, but the relief behind them was palpable. At the door, Gabriel paused. One more question, Mrs. Greeley. What brought you out west in the first place? Vivian's expression clouded. I was running from one past, only to create another to run from. Ironic, isn't it? Gabriel tipped his hat. Get some rest. Lock your door. As he descended the stairs, the saloon patrons watched him expectantly. He ignored their curious stares and headed straight for the telegraph office, mind already composing the messages he needed to send to verify Vivian's story. What neither of them knew was that Edward Blackstone had not fled as far as Vivian believed. In fact, he was less than a day's ride from Whispering Creek, and he had no intention of leaving any loose ends that could lead back to him. The next morning, Vivian awoke to a tentative knock on her door. Sleep had been elusive, coming in fitful bursts interrupted by nightmares of blood and gunshots. She pulled a shawl around her shoulders and approached the door cautiously. Who is it? Martha Stevens, madam. I run the dress shop across the street. Sheriff Porter asked me to bring you some things. Vivian opened the door to find a plump, middle-aged woman holding a stack of folded fabrics. Her kind face bore the weathered lines of someone who'd spent decades under the western sun. The sheriff thought you might need some clean clothes, Martha explained, stepping into the room when Vivian gestured for her to enter. And I brought some soap and hairpins too. Figured you might not have had time to pack properly. That's very kind. Vivian accepted the bundle gratefully. I'll pay you, of course, Martha waved away her words. Already settled with the sheriff. You can come by my shop later if you need anything else fitted properly. Her eyes traveled briefly to the blood-stained dress draped over the chair. I can take that away for you, if you'd like. Some things are better not kept as reminders. The offer was made with such simple kindness that Vivian found herself blinking back unexpected tears. Yes, please. Thank you. After Martha left with the ruined emerald dress, Vivian washed herself as best she could with the basin of water and changed into one of the simple but well-made dresses the seamstress had brought. It was plain compared to the fashionable attire she'd been accustomed to, but there was something freeing about its simplicity. Another knock came just as she was pinning up her hair. This time, it was Gabriel Porter, his expression grave. Got replies to my telegrams, he said without preamble. Your story checks out. Stagecoach was found with Thomas Ryan's body inside. He was known to law enforcement in Colorado and Nevada, small-time confidence man, usually worked with a partner. Relief flooded through Vivian. So you believe me? I do. Gabriel nodded. But there's more. Edward Blackstone has been identified heading this way. A station master at Fort Collins recognized him from the description I sent. Fear clutched at Vivian's heart. He's coming here? Appears so. Gabriel's hand instinctively moved to rest on his holstered revolver. I've alerted my deputies. We'll catch him when he arrives. You don't understand, Vivian said, her voice tight with anxiety. Edward is clever. He won't just ride into town announcing himself. Then what do you suggest? Vivian thought for a moment. He knows I'll have told the authorities what happened. He'll come in disguised, gather information, try to find me when I'm vulnerable. Gabriel considered this. Then perhaps we should give him what he wants, information that will lead him exactly where we want him. You want to use me as bait, Vivian said flatly. Not exactly. Gabriel leaned against the doorframe. But we could spread word that you're staying at my ranch outside town. He'd likely try to find you there, away from the law. Except I wouldn't actually be there. A slight smile tugged at Gabriel's mouth. Quick thinking, Mrs. Greeley. No, you'd be safe in town while we wait for him to take the bait. Vivian weighed her options. The plan had merit, but also risks. And if he doesn't fall for it, then we keep you safe until we can arrange for you to travel somewhere he won't find you. Gabriel straightened. But from what I've gathered about Edward Blackstone, he doesn't like loose ends. He'll come for you. The certainty in his voice sent a chill through Vivian. Very well, Sheriff. I'll trust your judgment. Good. Pack your things. I'll take you to stay with Martha Stevens. Her shop has living quarters above it. Few people will think to look for you there. What about you? Vivian asked, gathering her meager possessions. Won't it be dangerous for you at the ranch? Gabriel's eyes held a glint of determination. Don't worry about me, Mrs. Greeley. I've handled worse than confidence men with delusions of grandeur. As they left the saloon together, Vivian was acutely aware of the whispers that followed them. Word of her arrival had spread through Whispering Creek like wildfire, and now seeing her leave with the sheriff would only fuel the gossip further. They're all staring, she murmured as they crossed the dusty main street. Small towns run on two things: hard work and hearsay. You've given them plenty of the latter. Gabriel kept a respectful distance beside her, but his presence was reassuring nonetheless. Martha welcomed Vivian warmly, showing her to a small but comfortable room above the dress shop. Nobody will bother you here, she promised, setting down a tray with tea and biscuits. And if anyone asks, I'll say I haven't seen hide nor hair of you since I delivered those dresses. Left alone, Vivian sat by the window, watching the town go about its business. Whispering Creek was so different from the sophisticated eastern cities she knew. There was a straightforward honesty to the place except, of course, for the whispers and stares that seemed to follow her. From her vantage point, she could see Gabriel conferring with two men wearing deputy badges before mounting his horse and riding out of town. The plan was in motion. Now all they could do was wait for Edward to take the bait. That evening, as the sun painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a stranger rode into Whispering Creek. He was well dressed but dusty from travel, his beard neatly trimmed, his manner polite as he inquired about accommodations at the hotel. Name's William Harrison, he told the clerk, signing the register with a flourish. Just passing through on business. What sort of business brings you to our little town, Mr. Harrison? The clerk asked conversationally. Investment opportunities. The man smiled pleasantly. I represent several Eastern financial interests looking to expand into the territories. The clerk nodded appreciatively. Well, you've come to the right place. Whispering Creek's growing fast. Might want to speak with Mayor Thompson about that. I'll certainly do that. The man who called himself William Harrison collected his room key. I don't suppose there's anywhere a weary traveler might get a decent meal and perhaps some local conversation? Tully's Saloon serves good beefsteak. And there's no shortage of conversation there, especially lately. The clerk lowered his voice conspiratorially. Town's been buzzing with excitement the past day or so. Harrison raised an eyebrow, the perfect picture of polite interest. Oh, What's happened? Woman rode in yesterday, dress covered in blood. Turns out she killed a man in self-defense when her husband tried to murder her. The clerk seemed delighted to share the gossip with a fresh audience. Sheriff took her out to his ranch for protection. Seems her husband's some kind of criminal. How dreadful, Harrison remarked, his expression appropriately shocked. The poor woman must be terrified. Sheriff Porter will keep her safe. He's the best lawman this county's seen in years. Harrison smiled. It's reassuring to know there are still men of integrity in these parts. Now, about that beefsteak. After getting directions to the saloon, he left the hotel, satisfaction evident in the slight curl of his lips. Edward Blackstone, for that was indeed who he was beneath the false beard and different clothes, had found Vivian far more quickly than he'd anticipated. Across town, unaware that her hunter had already arrived, Vivian was sharing a simple dinner with Martha Stevens. "Tell me," Martha said, passing a plate of cornbread, "what will you do after this business with your former husband is resolved?" Vivian hesitated. It was a question she'd been avoiding. "I haven't thought that far ahead. My family in Boston." She trailed off, then started again. "They warned me against James Edward. Said he was too charming, too perfect. I didn't listen. Pride's a hard thing to swallow," Martha said sagely. "Even harder to admit when we've been wrong." It wasn't just pride. Vivian stared into her cup of coffee. "I was running from them, from their expectations. My father had arranged a marriage to a business associate 30 years my senior. Edward seemed like salvation." Martha reached across the table and patted Vivian's hand. "We all make mistakes when we're young. It's what we do afterward that defines us." "I'm not sure I know who I am without the mistakes," Vivian admitted. "Then this is your chance to find out." Martha's eyes crinkled kindly. "The West is full of people reinventing themselves. Some running from the law, others from heartbreak or failure. But the lucky ones are running towards something, not away." Vivian considered this. "What would I run toward? I have no skills for frontier life. I can play the pianoforte and recite French poetry, but I've never even cooked my own meals." Martha laughed. "Those aren't the only options, dear. Whispering Creek has a school that needs a teacher. The current one, Miss Abernathy, is getting married next month and moving to Denver with her new husband. A teacher." Vivian had never considered such a possibility. In Boston, her education had been ornamental, designed to make her an appealing wife, not to provide a means of independence. Just something to consider. Martha stood to clear the dishes. "Now get some rest. Tomorrow might bring resolution, one way or another." Outside town, Gabriel Porter sat on the porch of his modest ranch house, rifle across his knees, waiting. His deputies, Samuel Wilson and Terrence Cooper, were positioned strategically around the property, Sam in the barn and Terry behind the water trough. The night was quiet save for the chorus of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. Gabriel didn't expect Blackstone to make his move in darkness, but he wasn't taking chances. Men like Blackstone were unpredictable, especially when cornered. As midnight approached with no sign of an intruder, Gabriel permitted himself to think about Vivian Greeley. There was more to her story than she'd revealed, he was certain. The practiced poise, the refined speech, she came from money and education. Yet here she was, hundreds of miles from civilization, caught in a deadly game with a man who'd pretended to love her. Something about her vulnerability, carefully hidden beneath layers of composure, stirred protective instincts Gabriel usually reserved for his town and its inhabitants. He told himself it was merely professional duty, the same he'd show any citizen in danger. But the flush of warmth that came with thoughts of her suggested otherwise. Dawn broke with no sign of Blackstone. Gabriel sent Deputy Cooper to check on Vivian, while he and Deputy Wilson continued their vigilance at the ranch. In town, Edward Blackstone, still maintaining his William Harrison persona, was making inquiries about property investments, a reasonable cover for asking questions about local residents, including the sheriff. Porter's got a nice spread about 3 miles east of town, Mayor Thompson told him over breakfast at the hotel restaurant. Nothing fancy, but good grazing land and a solid house. Been there about 2 years now. Sounds like he's well established, Blackstone remarked. Married? No, though not for lack of interested parties. The mayor chuckled. He keeps to himself mostly. Dedicated to the job. Admirable, Blackstone nodded. I'd like to see more of the area while I'm here. Perhaps ride out, get a feel for the land values. Can't go wrong in any direction, Thompson assured him. Though if you head east, you might want to give the Porter place a wide berth today. Blackstone's interest sharpened, though he kept his expression merely curious. Oh, why is that? Just some trouble he's handling. Criminal matter. Thompson lowered his voice. Between us, he's protecting a witness. Woman whose husband turned out to be some kind of swindler. Tried to kill her, from what I hear. How dramatic, Blackstone said lightly. Your sheriff sounds like quite the hero. Whispering Creek's lucky to have him. After breakfast, Blackstone rented a horse from the livery stable, claiming he wanted to explore potential investment sites. Once out of town, he circled around to approach the Porter Ranch from the south, using a stand of cottonwood trees for cover. Through his field glasses, he observed the property carefully. The sheriff was visible on the porch, rifle in hand. Another man, presumably a deputy, was near the corral. Blackstone frowned. He'd hoped to find Vivian alone or lightly guarded. This would require a different approach. Back in town, Vivian was growing restless in her confinement at Martha's shop. Deputy Cooper had assured her that all was quiet at the ranch, but that didn't ease her anxiety. Perhaps I should leave Whispering Creek, she suggested when Martha brought up lunch. Draw Edward away from here. And go where? Martha asked practically. Besides, the sheriff's plan seems sound. Better to catch this man than have him chasing you across the territories. Vivian sighed, acknowledging the truth in Martha's words. I just hate being the cause of so much trouble. You didn't cause anything, Martha said firmly. That husband of yours did. And from what I hear, he's caused plenty before you came along. A knock at the shop door downstairs interrupted their conversation. Martha went to answer it, returning moments later with an envelope. Message for you, she said, handing it to Vivian. Deputy Cooper brought it from the sheriff. Vivian opened it quickly, reading the brief note inside. He wants me to come to the ranch, she said, confused. Says they've spotted Blackstone in the area and want me there where they can protect me directly. Martha frowned. That seems odd. The whole plan was to keep you away from there. Perhaps they've changed tactics. Vivian reread the note. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the signature read, G. Porter, Sheriff. I don't like it, Martha declared. Wait here. She left the room briefly, returning with Deputy Cooper. Did the sheriff send this note? Martha demanded, handing it to him. Cooper read it, his brow furrowing. No, madam. I've been with him all morning until he sent me to check on Mrs. Greeley. He didn't write any notes. Vivian's blood ran cold. It's from Edward. He's trying to lure me out. But how did he know you were here? Martha wondered. He must have been watching, Cooper said grimly. Saw me come to the shop. Or someone told him, Vivian suggested. A town full of whispers who knows what information has reached him. Cooper tucked the forged note into his pocket. I need to alert the sheriff. Mrs. Greeley, stay here with Mrs. Stevens. Don't open the door for anyone but me or Sheriff Porter. After the deputy left, Vivian paced the small room anxiously. This changes everything. Edward knows I'm not at the ranch. He's here in town, close enough to deliver this note. And clever enough to forge the sheriff's signature, Martha added, looking troubled. You're right, dear. He won't be an easy man to catch. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Martha returned to her shop duties, leaving Vivian alone with her thoughts and fears. As dusk approached, she heard a commotion downstairs, raised voices, including Martha's. Vivian moved quietly to the door, listening. I told you, she's not here, Martha was saying firmly. My sources say otherwise, madam. The voice was cultured, confident, and unmistakably Edward's, despite his attempt to disguise it. I represent the Boston law firm of Harrington and Sons. Mrs. Greeley's family has engaged us to find her. Vivian's heart pounded. Edward was directly below her, separated only by a wooden floor and Martha's determination to protect her. I don't know any Mrs. Greeley, Martha insisted. Now, if you don't mind, I'm closing the shop. Perhaps this will refresh your memory. Edward's voice hardened slightly. I'm authorized to offer a substantial reward for information leading to her whereabouts. Vivian held her breath, silently praying that Martha wouldn't be tempted. I'm not interested in rewards, Mr. Jenkins. Howard Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins. Now please leave. As I said, I'm closing. There was a pause. Then Edward's voice dropped to a menacing whisper that Vivian could barely hear. I know she's here. And if you don't tell me where, I might have to become less polite in my inquiries. The threat hung in the air for a moment before Martha responded, her voice steady. You're threatening the wrong woman, mister. The sheriff won't take kindly to that. The sheriff isn't here, Edward pointed out. And by the time he arrives, I'll be gone with what I came for. Vivian heard a scuffle, followed by Martha's cry of pain. Without thinking, she grabbed a heavy ceramic water pitcher and rushed downstairs. Edward, now bearded and dressed in an expensive suit, had Martha by the arm. His other hand held a small derringer pointed at the seamstress's side. He looked up as Vivian appeared, his face transforming into a triumphant smile. Ah, there you are, my dear wife. I was beginning to think you were avoiding me. Let her go, Edward, Vivian said, gripping the pitcher tightly. Your quarrel is with me. Edward's eyes narrowed at the use of his real name. I see the sheriff has been sharing information. How cozy. Release Mrs. Stevens, Vivian repeated, taking a step closer. Edward's smile turned cruel. I don't think so. In fact, I think Mrs. Stevens is going to join us for a little ride out of town. Insurance, you might say, against any heroics on your part. Martha struggled against his grip. You won't get away with this. The whole town will be looking for us. By the time they realize you're gone, we'll be miles away. Edward gestured with the derringer. Now, Vivian, put down whatever weapon you're clutching and come here, or I'll demonstrate how effective this little gun can be at close range. Vivian calculated her options. The pitcher might knock the gun from his hand if thrown with enough force, but if she missed, Martha would pay the price. She slowly lowered the pitcher to a nearby table. That's better. Edward nodded approvingly. Now, we're going to walk calmly to the livery stable where I have horses waiting. If either of you screams or tries to run, I'll kill the other. Understood. Both women nodded grimly. Excellent. Ladies first. He gestured toward the door, keeping the gun pressed to Martha's side. As they stepped into the street, the setting sun cast long shadows across Whispering Creek. Few people were about. Most had gone home for supper or to the saloon for evening drinks. Edward directed them toward the livery stable at the edge of town, maintaining a casual appearance to any who might glance their way. Just a bit further, he murmured. Keep smiling, Vivian. We're old friends out for an evening ride. They were halfway to the stable when a voice called out from behind them. Evening, Mrs. Stevens. Mrs. Greeley. Edward stiffened as Gabriel Porter approached, his casual stride belying the alertness in his eyes. Sheriff, Edward said smoothly, turning to face him while keeping the women positioned in front of him. Howard Jenkins. I'm an attorney representing Mrs. Greeley's family. Gabriel's gaze flicked to Vivian, noting her tense posture and frightened eyes. Is that so? Funny. I received a telegram from Boston today. Seems Mrs. Greeley's family is quite concerned about her disappearance with a man claiming to be James Greeley. No mention of any attorney. Edward's pleasant expression didn't waver, but his grip on Martha's arm tightened. The arrangements were made after that telegram was sent, I assure you. I'm sure you can provide credentials. Gabriel took a step closer. Edward's free hand moved slightly, bringing the concealed derringer into position between the women. Of course, but we're in a bit of a hurry. Mrs. Greeley has agreed to return east with me on tonight's stage. That stage left an hour ago, Gabriel said mildly. Next one's not until morning. The standoff stretched for a tense moment. Then Edward made his move, shoving Martha forcefully toward the sheriff while grabbing Vivian by the arm and pulling her against him, the derringer now visibly pressed to her temple. Stay back, Sheriff, he warned as Gabriel steadied Martha. I have nothing to lose now, thanks to my dear wife's loose tongue. Gabriel's hand hovered near his holstered revolver. Let her go, Blackstone. There's nowhere to run. Edward laughed bitterly. There's always somewhere to run. I've made a career of it. He began backing away, dragging Vivian with him. Here's how this will proceed. Mrs. Greeley and I are going to take 2 horses from that stable. You're going to stay right here until we're well away, or she dies. Simple enough. You kill her, you lose your hostage, Gabriel pointed out. Not a smart play. Perhaps not. Edward's voice hardened. But I've already lost everything else because of her. Sometimes revenge is worth the cost. Vivian, pressed against Edward's side, felt the cold metal of the derringer against her skin. In that moment, a strange calm settled over her. She was tired of being afraid, tired of running, tired of being a victim of Edward's schemes. As they neared the stable, she deliberately stumbled, throwing off Edward's balance just enough to create space between them. It wasn't much, just inches, but it was enough for Gabriel to take his shot. The report of the sheriff's revolver echoed through the street. Edward jerked backward, the derringer firing harmlessly into the dirt as he fell. Vivian stumbled forward into Gabriel's outstretched arm, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "Are you hurt?" Gabriel asked urgently, his eyes searching her face. Vivian shook her head, unable to form words as the reality of what had just happened washed over her. Edward lay motionless in the street, a dark stain spreading across his expensive suit jacket. Martha hurried to Vivian's side, wrapping a supportive arm around her waist. "Let's get you inside, dear. This is no place for you." As they turned away, Gabriel knelt beside Edward's body, checking for signs of life. Finding none, he closed the dead man's eyes and stood, his expression grim. By morning, the whole town knew the story how the infamous confidence man Edward Blackstone had met his end at the hands of Sheriff Porter while trying to kidnap the woman he'd deceived into marriage. The talk was all about the dramatic shootout, the Eastern lady's brush with death, and the sheriff's timely intervention. But for Vivian, the aftermath was quiet reflection. Seated in Martha's parlor above the dress shop, she sipped tea and tried to reconcile the tumultuous events of the past days with the sudden calm that had descended. "The stage to Denver leaves tomorrow," Martha mentioned, refilling Vivian's cup. "If you're still planning to go." Vivian looked up, surprised. "I haven't decided yet." "No need to rush," Martha assured her. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need." A knock at the door interrupted them. Gabriel stood on the threshold, hat in hand, looking somewhat uncomfortable in the feminine surroundings of Martha's home. "Mrs. Greeley," he nodded respectfully, "I wanted to let you know that I've received confirmation from the authorities in Colorado. With Blackstone's death and your testimony about the stagecoach incident, they consider the matter closed. You're free to go wherever you please." "Thank you, Sheriff." Vivian gestured to an empty chair. "Won't you join us?" Gabriel hesitated, then took the offered seat. Martha excused herself with a knowing smile, leaving them alone. "How are you feeling?" Gabriel asked once Martha had gone. "Strange," Vivian admitted. "Relieved, certainly, but also adrift. Everything I thought I knew about my life has changed in the span of a week." Gabriel nodded. "The West has a way of stripping away pretenses, forces you to confront who you really are." "And who am I, Sheriff Porter?" Vivian asked softly. "The naive Boston socialite who ran from an arranged marriage? The foolish woman who fell for a confidence man's scheme? The accidental killer fleeing a stagecoach?" "I see a survivor," Gabriel said simply. "Someone who faced terrible choices and still found her way through. That counts for something out here." Vivian looked away, unexpectedly moved by his assessment. "Martha mentioned the school needs a teacher." "Miss Abernathy is leaving next month," Gabriel confirmed. "Town council would be grateful for someone with your education. I've never taught before, but you've learned plenty, I'd wager." A slight smile softened his features. "Sometimes the best teachers are those who've had to learn the hard way." Vivian found herself returning his smile. "Perhaps I'll stay a while then. See if teaching suits me. Whispering Creek could use more people like you." Gabriel stood, placing his hat back on his head. People willing to make a fresh start. As he turned to leave, Vivian called after him. "Sheriff Porter, thank you, not just for saving my life, but for believing me when you had every reason to doubt." Gabriel paused at the door. "In my experience, Mrs. Greeley, the truth has a certain weight to it. Your story had that weight." With a tip of his hat, he was gone. Over the following weeks, Vivian settled into life in Whispering Creek. Martha helped her find modest lodgings near the schoolhouse and introduced her to the town council, who were indeed grateful for her willingness to take over teaching duties. The whispers continued, of course. Small towns rarely forgot juicy scandals, and Vivian's arrival had provided one of the most dramatic Whispering Creek had seen in years. But as time passed, the whispers changed in nature, less about her mysterious past and more about her dedication to her pupils, her growing friendship with the sheriff, and speculation about whether that friendship might develop into something more. Gabriel found himself stopping by the schoolhouse regularly, ostensibly to check on the town's newest resident, but increasingly because he enjoyed Vivian's company. There was an intelligence and resilience about her that he admired, and a vulnerability that stirred his protective instincts. One evening in late summer, nearly 3 months after Vivian's arrival, Gabriel invited her to dinner at the small restaurant that had recently opened on the edge of town. It was the closest thing to a formal dining establishment Whispering Creek possessed, and the invitation represented a significant step in their evolving relationship. They were midway through their meal when a traveling salesman at a nearby table, having imbibed too freely of the restaurant's whiskey, began loudly regaling his companions with local gossip he'd collected during his stay. "And that schoolteacher," he said, voice carrying across the room. "Pretty little thing with the fancy Eastern accent. Heard she killed 2 men before she got here. Ran away with some fella's money after she shot him. Sheriff's sweet on her, but they say she's just using him for protection till she can move on to her next mark." The restaurant fell silent, all eyes darting between the oblivious salesman and Vivian, whose face had gone pale. Gabriel's expression darkened dangerously as he started to rise from his chair. Vivian placed a hand on his arm. "No," she said quietly. "Let me." She stood, smoothing her skirts before walking calmly to the salesman's table. The man looked up, finally noticing the hush that had fallen over the room. "I believe you're discussing me, sir," Vivian said, her voice clear and steady. "Allow me to correct your misinformation. I killed 1 man, in self-defense, after he attempted to murder me. The sheriff shot the second, my fraudulent husband, when he tried to kidnap me at gunpoint." The salesman's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. "As for using Sheriff Porter for protection," Vivian continued, "I can assure you that his interest in my welfare is entirely professional, as is proper between a law enforcement officer and a citizen under his jurisdiction." This last statement caused several knowing glances among the restaurant's patrons, who had witnessed the growing attachment between the sheriff and the schoolteacher. "Furthermore," Vivian concluded, "I would appreciate it if you would refrain from spreading falsehoods about matters you know nothing about. Gossip may seem harmless to you, but it can destroy lives. Good evening." She returned to their table, her composure intact despite the trembling Gabriel could see in her hands. Before she could sit, however, Gabriel had risen to his feet, his expression resolute. "Mrs. Greeley is being modest," he announced to the room at large. What she omitted is that the man she was forced to kill was a known criminal who had victimized women across 3 states. She showed remarkable courage both during that incident and in helping to bring her fugitive husband to justice. He turned to Vivian, taking her hands in his. "And while her statement about my professional interest is correct as far as it goes, I would be remiss if I didn't clarify something." Vivian looked up at him, confusion evident in her eyes. "My interest in Mrs. Greeley's welfare ceased to be purely professional some time ago," Gabriel continued, his voice softening as he addressed her directly. "In fact, I find myself increasingly concerned with her happiness as well as her safety, a concern that goes well beyond my duties as sheriff." A murmur rippled through the restaurant as the patrons realized they were witnessing something significant. "Gabriel," Vivian whispered, conscious of the audience but unable to look away from the intensity in his gaze. "I apologize for the public nature of this," he said quietly, "but I couldn't let that man's words stand unchallenged. Not when the truth is so different." The salesman, now thoroughly embarrassed, threw money on his table and hastily departed. The other diners, however, lingered, shamelessly eavesdropping on the unfolding drama. Gabriel glanced around, noting their rapt attention. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation elsewhere." Vivian nodded, grateful for the suggestion. They left the restaurant together, walking in companionable silence until they reached the small bridge that crossed Whisper Creek at the edge of town. "I apologize again," Gabriel said as they stopped midway across the bridge. "That wasn't how I'd planned our evening." Vivian leaned against the railing, looking out at the water silvered by moonlight. "Did you mean what you said? About your interest in me?" "Every word." Gabriel moved to stand beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "I've tried to maintain a professional distance, given all you've been through. But the truth is, I started falling for you that first day in the saloon room, when you stood your ground despite everything. I thought you were simply doing your job," Vivian admitted. being kind to the traumatized widow. Gabriel smiled slightly. I was doing my job, and you were traumatized. But that doesn't change what I began feeling then, or what I feel now. Vivian turned to face him. And what do you feel now, Sheriff Porter? That I'd very much like to court you properly, Mrs. Greeley, if you'd be amenable. The formality of his request, at odds with the emotion in his voice, made Vivian smile. I believe I would be amenable, yes. Gabriel's relief was palpable. I know it's soon after everything that happened. It is, Vivian agreed. And yet, time moves differently here than it did in Boston. A day can feel like a lifetime when you're fighting for survival. 3 months can be enough to know your own heart. And what does your heart tell you? Gabriel asked softly. That despite everything, or perhaps because of it, I found myself exactly where I'm meant to be. Vivian reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing against his. With someone who sees me clearly, past and all, and still believes I'm worth protecting. Gabriel entwined his fingers with hers. You don't need me to protect you, Vivian. You've proven that. But I'd like to stand beside you all the same. Under the vast canopy of stars, with the gentle murmur of the creek below, Gabriel lowered his head and kissed her. It was a tender kiss, full of promise and new beginnings. When they parted, Vivian felt a sense of certainty she hadn't experienced since before her world had collapsed around her. I should walk you home, Gabriel said, reluctance evident in his tone. It's getting late. Yes, Vivian agreed, though she made no move to leave the bridge. The town will talk, you know, more than they already do. Let them, Gabriel said simply. I've never much cared for gossip. As autumn painted Whispering Creek in golds and russets, Gabriel and Vivian's courtship became the town's favorite topic of conversation. They attended church together on Sundays, took evening walks along the creek, and were often seen in deep discussion on the porch of Vivian's small rented house. For Vivian, these months were a revelation. After the whirlwind deception of her relationship with Edward, Gabriel's steady, honest affection was like cool water after a drought. He never pushed, never presumed, treating her with a respect that helped heal wounds she hadn't fully acknowledged. By Christmas, their intentions toward one another were clear to everyone in Whispering Creek. The holiday celebration at the schoolhouse, organized by Vivian for her students and their families, became an unofficial announcement of their relationship when Gabriel presented her with a small package in front of the assembled townspeople. Inside was a delicate silver brooch shaped like a book, with a tiny key attached by a fine chain. The bookseller in Denver helped me choose it, Gabriel explained as Vivian admired the gift. Said it represents knowledge unlocking the future. It's beautiful, Vivian said softly, pinning it to her dress. The symbolism wasn't lost on her or on the observant townswomen who whispered their approval of the sheriff's thoughtful present. As winter settled over the valley, bringing crisp, cold days and long nights, Gabriel and Vivian's relationship deepened. He began to share stories of his past growing up in Missouri, losing his parents to influenza when he was 16, working as a ranch hand before becoming a deputy in Kansas, and eventually finding his way to Whispering Creek. In turn, Vivian opened up about her sheltered upbringing in Boston, her rebellion against her family's expectations, and her desperate flight west with Edward. The more they shared, the stronger their connection grew. On a bright February morning, as they walked through the snow-covered town, Gabriel led Vivian to a small parcel of land on the outskirts of Whispering Creek. What do you think? He asked, gesturing to the open space with pine trees bordering one side and a view of the distant mountains. It's lovely, Vivian replied, confused by the question. But what am I supposed to be thinking about? Gabriel looked uncharacteristically nervous. I bought it. Last week. You bought land? For what purpose? For building. He took a deep breath. For building a home. Our home, if you'll have me. Vivian's heart seemed to stop. Gabriel, are you asking? I'm asking you to marry me, Vivian. He took her gloved hands in his. I know it hasn't been a year since Edward, and if you need more time, I understand. But I love you, and I want to spend my life with you. Tears sprang to Vivian's eyes, freezing on her lashes in the cold air. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Gabriel's face broke into a smile of such pure joy that Vivian felt her heart might burst. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an exuberant embrace before setting her down and kissing her with a passion that left them both breathless. "I thought we might build there," he said when they finally separated, pointing to a flat area near the trees. "Good protection from the wind, but still a view of the mountains you love." "It's perfect," Vivian agreed, already envisioning their life together. "When shall we marry?" "As soon as the snow melts and the preacher can make it from Fort Collins," Gabriel suggested. "Unless you want to wait for summer?" "Spring will be perfect," Vivian decided. A new beginning. News of their engagement spread through Whispering Creek with predictable speed. Martha Stevens immediately offered to make Vivian's wedding dress, while the town council granted Gabriel a week's leave from his sheriff's duties for a brief honeymoon. As the date approached, Vivian found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this point. From Boston socialite to fugitive widow to respected schoolteacher and soon-to-be sheriff's wife, it was a transformation she could never have imagined. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in April, with the ceremony to be held in the schoolhouse where Vivian taught. As the day drew near, preparations consumed the town. Women baked pies and cakes, men constructed extra tables for the celebration, and children gathered wildflowers to decorate the schoolroom. The night before the wedding, Vivian sat with Martha in the seamstress's parlor, where they were putting the final touches on her dress, a simple but elegant creation of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. "Are you nervous?" Martha asked, securing the last button. Vivian considered the question. "Not about marrying Gabriel. That feels right in a way nothing else ever has." She smiled ruefully. "I am a bit concerned about being the center of attention tomorrow. The whispers have finally started to die down." Martha snorted. "Those whispers turned to admiration months ago, dear. You've earned this town's respect many times over." "I hope so," Vivian said softly. "I've come to love Whispering Creek. It feels more like home than Boston ever did." "That's because you found yourself here," Martha observed sagely. "The real Vivian, not the one your family or Edward Blackstone tried to make you be." As Vivian prepared for bed that night in her small rented house, she thought about Martha's words. There was truth in them. For the first time in her life, she was living on her own terms, making choices based on her own desires rather than others' expectations. Morning dawned clear and bright, with the scent of spring in the air. Vivian dressed with Martha's help, her heart light with anticipation. The ivory silk dress fit perfectly, complemented by a simple arrangement of wildflowers in her upswept hair. The schoolhouse was transformed when they arrived, desks pushed to the walls, benches arranged in rows, and spring blossoms adorning every available surface. It seemed the entire population of Whispering Creek had squeezed into the modest building, with latecomers standing at the back and peering through open windows. Gabriel waited at the front beside the traveling preacher, looking more handsome than Vivian had ever seen him in his best dark suit, his usually tousled hair neatly combed. The expression on his face as she walked toward him, wonder, love, and profound gratitude, was one she knew she would remember until her dying day. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to honor, support, and cherish one another through whatever challenges life might bring. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Gabriel kissed her with such tenderness that several of the townswomen dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. The celebration that followed spilled out onto the schoolyard and continued well into the evening. There was music from local fiddle players, dancing on the packed earth, and enough food to feed twice their number. Vivian moved through it all in a happy daze, Gabriel's hand warm and reassuring in hers. As twilight deepened into night, they slipped away from the festivities to the house Gabriel had been preparing for them. Though not fully finished, some interior walls were still bare lumber, and many furnishings had yet to arrive from Denver. It was structurally complete and ready for habitation. "Welcome home, Mrs. Porter," Gabriel said, lifting her across the threshold with ease. Vivian laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "That will take some getting used to." "We have time," he reminded her, setting her gently on her feet. "All the time in the world." Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their new home, Vivian rested her head on Gabriel's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "I never thought I'd find this," she confessed. "After Edward, I thought I'd never trust anyone again, let alone love them. Gabriel's fingers traced gentle patterns on her bare shoulder. You're the bravest person I know, Vivian Porter. Brave enough to risk your heart again despite everything. It didn't feel like bravery, she murmured. It felt like coming home. Life settled into a rhythm for the Porters as spring bloomed into summer. Vivian continued teaching while helping Gabriel complete their house. Weekdays were filled with work, Vivian with her students, Gabriel with his duties as sheriff, while evenings and weekends were spent building their life together. By midsummer, the house was finished, a comfortable blend of Eastern refinement and Western practicality. Vivian's pianoforte, shipped from Boston after a cautious reconciliation with her family, sat in the front parlor. Bookshelves filled with volumes from both their collections lined the study walls. The kitchen garden flourished under Vivian's care, a skill she'd never imagined possessing in her previous life. As August heat shimmered across the valley, Vivian made an important discovery. After several days of unexpected fatigue and morning queasiness, she visited Doc Wilson, who confirmed what she had begun to suspect. She was expecting a child. She told Gabriel that evening as they sat on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder after she shared the news. "We're going to have a baby." Vivian nodded, a mixture of excitement and trepidation filling her. "In late winter, the doctor thinks. February or March." Gabriel's hand covered hers, his touch reverent. "Are you happy about this?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Terrified, but happy. I never thought I'd have this chance, a true marriage, a family of my own." "You'll be a wonderful mother," Gabriel assured her, drawing her close. "Our child will be so loved." As word of Vivian's pregnancy spread through Whispering Creek, the last lingering whispers about her past faded entirely, replaced by the normal speculation and advice that accompanies any expectant mother. Martha Stevens immediately began planning baby clothes, while the wives of ranchers and shopkeepers shared remedies for morning sickness and swollen ankles. Winter arrived early that year, with the first heavy snow falling in November. Vivian's students were delighted by the unexpected holiday, while she was secretly grateful for the enforced rest as her pregnancy advanced. The school board had already arranged for a substitute teacher to take over her classes for several months after the birth. Miss Henderson, a young woman from Denver eager for her first teaching position. Christmas was a quiet, intimate affair for Gabriel and Vivian. They exchanged simple gifts before joining the town celebration, where Gabriel announced the impending arrival of the newest citizen of Whispering Creek to enthusiastic applause. January brought heavy snows that isolated the town for weeks at a time. Gabriel worried about Vivian's condition, ensuring they had ample supplies and arranging for Doc Wilson to stay nearby as her time approached. On a bitterly cold morning in early February, while a blizzard howled outside their snug home, Vivian's labor began. Gabriel sent word to the doctor and Martha, who arrived despite the weather to assist with the birth. After hours of labor that tested Vivian's endurance beyond anything she had experienced before, their daughter arrived, a robust, healthy girl with a shock of dark hair and her father's whiskey-colored eyes. "She's perfect," Gabriel whispered, cradling the swaddled infant with careful hands. Just like her mother. Exhausted but radiant, Vivian watched her husband and daughter together, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "What shall we call her?" They had discussed names during the long winter evenings, but had never reached a final decision. Gabriel studied the tiny face. "What about Hope? It seems fitting." "Hope Porter." Vivian tested the name, finding it settled comfortably in her heart. "Yes, that's who she is." As spring once again transformed Whispering Creek, Vivian often sat on their porch with Hope in her arms, watching Gabriel work in the yard or tend to the small herd of cattle he'd recently acquired. Their life was not without challenges. The duties of a sheriff's wife and mother while maintaining her teaching position stretched Vivian's capabilities, but the profound contentment she felt far outweighed any difficulties. One warm May afternoon, as Vivian walked through town with Hope secured in a sling across her chest, she overheard a conversation between two men seated outside the barber shop. They were strangers, cattle buyers from Wyoming, judging by their conversation, and they hadn't noticed her approach. "That the schoolteacher?" one asked, nodding discreetly toward Vivian. "Yeah, sheriff's wife now," his companion replied. Pretty little thing, ain't she? Heard some stories about her in Cheyenne. They say she killed her first husband, some kind of con man. Shot him dead and fled with his money. That right? The second man sounded impressed. Wouldn't have pegged her for a killer. Supposedly the sheriff here covered it up because he'd taken a shine to her. Married her quick to keep her from hanging. Vivian stopped in her tracks, ice forming in her veins despite the warm day. The old rumors, distorted and more malicious than ever, had spread beyond Whispering Creek. Before she could decide whether to confront them or walk away, another voice entered the conversation, deep, authoritative, and unmistakably angry. "That's my wife you're talking about." Gabriel stood behind the two men, his expression thunderous. They turned, startled by his sudden appearance. "Sheriff, we didn't mean," the first man began, but Gabriel cut him off. "Let me set the record straight," he said, his voice low but carrying clearly to where Vivian stood. "My wife was victimized by a notorious confidence man who married her under false pretenses. When she discovered his true identity, he attempted to murder her. In the ensuing struggle, his accomplice was killed." The men shifted uncomfortably under Gabriel's hard stare. "Later, that same man attempted to kidnap her at gunpoint. I shot him dead in the street, not 20 yards from where you're sitting." Gabriel pointed toward the spot. "Every action my wife took was in self-defense, verified by authorities in 3 states. She is a respected teacher, a beloved mother, and the finest woman I've ever known." The men had the grace to look ashamed. "We didn't realize," the second man started. "No, you didn't," Gabriel agreed coldly. "You repeated vicious gossip about someone you don't know, someone who's endured more hardship than most men could withstand. I suggest you find another topic of conversation while you're in my town." The men nodded, mumbling apologies. Gabriel turned away from them, his gaze softening immediately when it landed on Vivian. He crossed to her side, one hand coming to rest protectively on Hope's small back. "You heard," he said quietly. Vivian nodded, blinking back tears. "It never really ends, does it? The past." "No," Gabriel acknowledged, guiding her away from the barber shop. "But it loses its power over time." They walked in silence for a moment, heading toward home. "Thank you," Vivian finally said, "for defending me." Again, Gabriel stopped, turning to face her fully. "I'll defend you until my dying day, Vivian Porter. Not because you need me to, you're stronger than anyone I know, but because the truth deserves to be spoken, especially about the woman I love." Vivian shifted Hope to one arm, so she could reach up and touch Gabriel's face. "Do you ever regret it? Taking on my complicated history?" "Never." His answer came without hesitation. "Your history made you who you are. And who you are is exactly who I want to spend my life with." In that moment, standing in the middle of Whispering Creek's main street with her husband and daughter, Vivian felt the last shadows of her past recede. The whispers would never completely disappear. Stories had a way of lingering, especially the scandalous ones, but they no longer had the power to hurt her. "Let's go home," she said, taking Gabriel's arm. As they walked through town toward their house on the outskirts, several townspeople greeted them warmly. To these people, her neighbors, her friends, her community, she wasn't the woman with the mysterious past or the scandalous arrival. She was Mrs. Porter, the schoolteacher with a gift for inspiring children, the sheriff's wife who'd brought music and literature to their frontier town, the mother who'd defied death to build a life worth living. Hope stirred against her chest, tiny fingers grasping at the fabric of Vivian's dress. Gabriel's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm, warm and steady. Beyond them, their home waited, not the ending of their story, but the beginning of everything that mattered. Years would pass, and Whispering Creek would grow from a small frontier settlement into a proper town with a railway station and a 2-story schoolhouse, where Vivian eventually became headmistress. Gabriel would serve as sheriff until their second child, a son named Samuel, was old enough to remember his father, at which point he would turn in his badge to focus on the ranch he'd built into a modest but prosperous operation. Hope would grow into a spirited young woman with her mother's intelligence and her father's sense of justice, eventually traveling east to attend college, completing a circle that Vivian could never have imagined when she fled Boston all those years ago. And sometimes, when new people came to town and asked about the elegant woman who ran the school, Someone might mention her dramatic arrival or the gunfight that had secured her freedom. But more often, they spoke of her kindness, her determination, and the love story that had transformed not only her life, but the very heart of Whispering Creek. For in the end, it wasn't the whispers about her past that defined Vivian Porter. It was the life she built despite them, the family she created, and the community that had learned through her example that second chances and new beginnings were possible for anyone brave enough to claim them.